we can go to the third part, which is myths and methods. And in this part, I usually talk about the misconceptions of the theories, and with the emphasis that we cannot do research, we cannot use methods or develop methods if we don't have a clear notion of the principles of the theory. So one possible belief, the first belief I wrote here is that the MCF is a theory. We already discussed that. It's actually
Framework.
a framework. And one of the things that concern you is when people tell you where is the evidence. So maybe you can.
Well, naturally, and this is over the since literally 1999, we've been working on this, and it's all built up with extensive reading, both within our preferred areas, which is psychology and linguistics, but also what's going on in contemporary cognitive science generally. So we've tried to shape the principles of the MCF according to the evidence that's been accumulated by many scientists. So it's a kind of an attempt to integrate a lot of different kinds of research, which is itself based on experimentation. Mm-hmm. So it's not like a hypothesis. Someone comes up with a hypothesis. You can say, well, what's your evidence for it? And you can say, well, I tested it and I did this experiment and this was the result. Or you can say, well, sorry, it's still a hypothesis. I haven't tested it yet. But you can't say that with the MCF. So it's a different animal, as it were.
Right. Yeah. Of course. Okay, so belief number 2, possibly misleading belief. So as a generative framework, the MCF is automatically incompatible with other theoretical approaches.
Non-generative ones.
Yes. Connectionist or emergentist. Or,
yes, I think it is a misleading belief because a lot of things which are shared, for example, Nick Ellis has a particular approach, which she now calls, I think, the Douglas Fir group approach, which is very different from ours. But he himself has acknowledged there's a lot in common, So whereas we might differ in certain aspects, it's not the case that everything is and to take an example, in the framework that we use, as you acquire a language, you develop, syntactic knowledge, phonological knowledge, and conceptual knowledge, and you have various associations between them that you build up over time, and they get stronger and stronger, you hope. So, all these things happen. But in particular, the conceptual system is very important because it's at the heart of all communication, whether you use language or not. And a lot of the research done by in linguistics, which is incompatible in its totality with us, actually, we would simply translate as very useful research to describe the meaning part of acquisition, right? So, and it has been a criticism from generative linguists about these non-generative studies that they don't really talk very much about syntax. It's mostly about what would be, it's mostly about semantics. And so, for example, if you talk about pragmatics and semantics and text and usage, it's all about it's all about the meanings of language, right? But not about how the meanings are expressed in sentence structure, in phonological structure. So, of course, they object to that criticism, but they would, wouldn't they? So, yes, I think it's a mistake to think that there are these various, even connectionism. Now, you will have seen thus far, I think, that there's a lot about our MCF, which has a connectionist character. It is, after all, associations are connections, and they're strengthened through frequency, and that means a lot to a connectionist. They will immediately say, yeah, that's exactly what I think, but they wouldn't agree with the family of expert systems.
Okay, right. Okay, And which brings us to another misconception. The MCF architecture is set in stone. So all these modules, they're set in stone. It will never change.
Well, yes, I suppose everything in life is relative, but as far as we can see, well, and we followed, John Truscott and I have followed an approach where we're looking for the most parsimonious explanations, right? The simplest possible explanation. So, but we fully recognize that even though we've only got 11 modules, including the affective one, and the affective module takes care of what some people would call appraisal. That means attaching values to various pluses or minus, values to various things, and emotions, basic emotions, the sort of things that we share with many other species, especially the other primates, but not only. And these ones can be grouped into positive and negative emotions. But you might in principle separate out appraisal, the value part, and the emotions. For example, you could talk about mathematical ability and say, well, that's a module, and you could break up the conceptual system into sub-modules if you wanted. But we aim for the most economical version, so it's not completely out of it, that someone might want to add a module here, or I don't think they want to take away a module, but we have at least 11, and that for the time being is fixed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. And then so the belief number 4 would be the MCF is about online processing only.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, indeed. This goes back to a traditional distinction we have in linguistics between those people who are deal with linguistic theory at this very high rational abstract level, out of time and out of space, looking at the logic of it, like the mainstream Chomsky linguistics. And then you have another set of people who look at online processing, sort of millisecond by millisecond. They count it. You have various machinery for doing that. They even look at the brain. You've got brain imaging. You've got eye tracking experiments. And they don't care about the representations. They either take very traditional ones to use for their research, or they simply borrow ones which have been produced by the theorists, right? And the MCF ignores that distinction because representations are being created as a result of processing. That's the point. So it's important to explain how representations are created. And you can leave, let's say, the theorists to give you a notion of what's in that biological starter package for syntax, for example, or for vision. That would be the people who are interested in vision, theory of vision, to mesh out the details. But we're certainly interested in how representations are created, how they remain, how they get changed. So it's certainly not the case that we are like psycholinguists interested in only looking at experiments that deal in milliseconds, but we're also interested in how it affects representations, and representation knowledge is the product of processing. Right. It doesn't get into your head any other way, So so we're not buying into this strict division that has taken.
That's interesting. So yeah, it's not that you take into account both, but that you refute the distinction. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.